In this week's lab, we will begin with a copper hydrate and synthesize a copper coordination compound. It is important that you follow all the steps carefully because next week we will be analyzing the compound to confirm it is actually a coordination compound and find its structure. To begin, you will measure about 3.5 grams of copper sulfate pentahydrate directly into a 125 milliliter Erlenmeyer flask, which is the one with the triangular base. Be sure to record the exact mass that you begin with. Add 15 milliliters of water, heat gently, and stir until all the copper is dissolved. After the copper is dissolved, allow it to cool to room temperature. In the hood, add 7.5 milliliters of concentrated ammonia to your sample. This may also be labeled as ammonium hydroxide. If you see a solid form, swirl until it dissolves. After it has dissolved, add 20 milliliters of ethanol and swirl. Place the flask in an ice bath for 5 minutes. Create your ice bath by placing ice and water in a beaker larger than your flask. Do not add so much water that your flask is able to tip over or you will lose your sample. While your sample is cooling, you should prepare a wash solution of 7 milliliters of ethanol and 5 milliliters of water. You should also prepare for vacuum filtration. If you are not familiar with vacuum filtration, please watch the linked video. The vacuum filtration setups we use in our lab vary slightly from the ones pictured in the lab procedure, so the video will help you more than the picture in the lab. After your sample has cooled, turn on the vacuum, wet the filter paper with a small amount of your wash solution, and filter your sample. Use a small amount of your wash solution and a rubber-tipped spatula to transfer as much as you can to the funnel. Use any remaining wash solution to wash the sample by pouring it over the entire solid sample in the funnel. Allow the sample to dry under vacuum for about 5 minutes. Using a rubber-tipped spatula, transfer your sample as completely as you can to a 50 milliliter beaker. In the hood, add 15 milliliters of water and 1 milliliter of ammonia. Remember, it may be labeled ammonium hydroxide to your sample and swirl to combine. Heat the sample until your solid is dissolved. Then add 10 milliliters of ethanol, which will cause a new solid to form. Place the sample in an ice bath for about 10 minutes. While this is cooling, clean your vacuum filtration setup because you will need it again. The liquid from the first filtration can remain in the filter flask until you are finished with the whole experiment, or it can go in the waste container. You should also make a second wash solution using the same 7 milliliters of ethanol and 5 milliliters of water from before. After your sample has cooled, filter it as before. Use some wash solution and a rubber spatula to transfer as much sample as you can to the funnel. Then wash the sample with any remaining wash solution and allow it to dry under the vacuum for about 5 minutes. While the sample is drying, find the mass of a small beaker. 50 milliliters is fine. After your sample is dry, transfer the sample to the weighed beaker, label it with your name, and place the sample in a desiccator to dry until next week's lab. The liquid from your filter flask should go in a waste container.